I'm Alexandra Kreis, and you're listening to Outer Travel in a Journey. Journeying now for 30 years into the life and practice of yoga, I have met many who have taken interesting turns, went past extraordinary bumps, and reached unexpected places. People with whom I shared conversations about everyday struggles, intimate realizations, larger questions, ideas, and dreams. So today, I'm passing on the mic to one of them so we could hear and celebrate the wisdom in people's differences and experiences. Hello, a very warm welcome to Outer Travel in a Journey. My name is Alexandra, and my guest on the show today is Veronica Layunta Maurel. Did I say that right?
You said it perfectly. Thank you. Thank you very much, Alexandra. Thank you for having me here.
Hello, Veronica. It's so good to finally have you on the mic. You know, as I said to you in the private warm up, I love listening to you. I could listen to you. You could be a storyteller in my eyes. You know, you could just become that. But for those who are not familiar with Veronica and haven't read the show notes, Veronica is currently an Ayurvedic health consultant and yoga teacher. But mainly what I get intrigued by, she has become a researcher who is writing a PhD in that's kind of interjuncted between creative writing and medical science. And at the heart of it is she's going to write a fictional novel. And at the end, while she does that, she's going to use it to prove that fictional writing is a valid way of researching. And at the heart of it is one of my favorite topics. It's trauma that has really kind of come into society and into awareness in society. So yes, this is the long introduction. She's currently in Nottingham. If you want to seek her out, please always refer to our show notes. You will also find her internet website and other ways of contacting her there. So Veronica, where are we getting started?
Well, thank you for this introduction. You said it so well.
Well, why don't we go through the events of your journey? Because most of all, what I want to show to people is that we always are on a journey, and some of the outer events stimulate our inner journeying, our inner experiences, and refreshing and refining what's happening inside, which some of us tend to ignore. So, yes, Veronica, you started off with the fact that at some point you got interested in Ayurveda. Yeah, and you were fascinated by, you know, the tests and the way Ayurveda looks at people in a different way than medical science does. And can you maybe repeat that story that you did earlier for me, what the first Ayurvedic practitioner said to you in a private consultation?
Yes. So I discovered the Ayurveda through curiosity, and it's one of those things that in life that you discover it, and then it feels like it's speaking to something very deep inside. In a way, you've always been there, and somebody's reminding you that home, you know, this place that you can call home. So I was doing a yoga teacher training, and Ayurveda was named, and I was curious because that is one of my problems. I'm always curious about everything. And I started researching, and you find all the typical quizzes, dosha quizzes, um, online, and thought that's very interesting. I started reading about it. And then eventually, actually, a colleague, I used to work in the university. I was working as a lecturer back then. And a colleague of mine said, "Oh, I found an Ayurveda practitioner close ish where we live." And I'm based in Nottingham in the UK. I said, "Oh, let's go, let's have a consultation." So I went to have a consultation, and then she started me off on this detox. I didn't think I had a problem. She said, "What's your problem? Why'd you come here?" And I said, "No, I don't have any problem." I said, "Okay." Then I found out that my vata was not very balanced, and
Mm.
and yeah, so she put me on a detox, and she put me on a detox, and it was fantastic. I felt amazing. I thought, yes, I love this Ayurveda thing. I'm going to just carry on here.
Yeah.
But one of the things when I came back for my follow-up consultation, and if you had a tick list, I would have been, or I was the perfect patient, if we want to call it, and or client, because okay, diet tick, meditation in the morning tick, your yoga practice tick, everything was tick, 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 tick.
Yeah.
And my Ayurveda practitioner said, okay, this is all very good and you feel fantastic and all that, but there's something very fundamental that needs to change in you, because if you don't change your lifestyle, you are going to become ill. And she said it like that, and I thought, what is this woman, what do you know? What do you know? Well, she did know, because after 2 years, unfortunately, I became very ill with ME, also called chronic fatigue syndrome. It lasted for about 18 months, and I was lucky to have Ayurveda too, and
Yeah.
so I could recover. But I was calling my Ayurveda practitioner. You were right. Can you help me? And yes, and then again, Ayurveda. I was told that I'd be on a wheelchair for the rest of my life, and
Mm.
a few months later, um, through Ayurveda and another mind body reconnecting practice
Yeah.
and therapy, then I got back to be better than well.
Yeah, that is so funny. I think we all come into Ayurveda, those of us who have an inclination, we hear about it and it offers so much, and we get hooked into the idea of food and body practices. If anything, I think our society gets more and more hooked on these two junctures, and Ayurveda has so much more to offer, which you found out then a little bit later, right?
Hmm. Yes, and just Ayurveda became you know, a lifestyle, and something deeper, and
Mm.
something that is not a checklist that you have to take and do. And we have this culture of doing, doing, doing. So it wasn't about doing more things, but it was maybe doing less. But it was about the journey and going inside, and all those gems, that's all that wisdom that was coming. And sometimes you didn't even recognize that it was wisdom, but yeah, it was much deeper. And unfortunately, I discovered I've discovered it the hard way, because then I had an accident
Mm.
a few years later,
Mm.
and I had a very severe head injury,
Mm.
very very severe,
Mm.
and I had concussion. I had brain bleed. I
Mm.
lost my vision at the beginning. It came back,
Mm.
and I had horrible headaches. And basically, it affected my sleep. Even I would say until not that long ago, I've been struggling with that. And again, when you look for solutions on, there's a checklist and do all that, it never works. There's something very fundamental. You still have to do it. You still have to be faithful to this practice. But it's not about what you do; is what happens underneath. Maybe even at the
Mm.
um, subconscious level. Who knows? And then through when I had this accident, this head injury, I was advised by somebody, why don't you start exploring trauma? And I said, well, I just have a head injury. I just need to go to neurologist and do my Ayurveda stuff and all
Mm.
that. And she said, well, I had a head injury in an accident a while ago, and I wish I knew what I know now. And just start exploring trauma, because
Yeah.
it's big, when something happens like that, and maybe you lose consciousness, and somehow your nervous system, and that's what happened to me, believes you're dead even though you're not, and you can
Ah,
get stuck into that trauma. So
wow.
the whole of the body just goes in shutdown. So it's not just the symptoms that you would have because you bang your head or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Is a more profound, and you can even have symptoms like you can go into depression
Yeah.
and being all coming from this. So it's a big trauma. So I started working um, on the traumatic part of having fallen and with
Mm.
all what happened. And
Mm.
that was like a huge portal because through this trauma, all the other traumas in the past found their way to become conscious and realize, wow, there's so much I need to work on. And that brought me to this idea that when we think of trauma, we think of really bad things happening to somebody, like being in a war or something really huge,
Abused or yeah.
attacked, and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that happens, and that's
Mm.
huge. That is huge. However, um, trauma is much deeper than that, to the point that I think if you are a human and you're alive and you reach certain age, you know, sooner or later, we're going to be suffering from some trauma, something that's going to completely change the way you see things, and maybe not in a positive way at the start unless you work through it. And it's
Exactly.
very there's a big stigma about being, oh, it's traumatized, or it's the big stigma, when I think
Mm.
that many people should be looking inside and working through.
Yeah,
um,
that's why I'm so happy that it's come to the acknowledgement in society. I understood through my conversation with Adair Finucane lately on this podcast that trauma is, we can all have the same experience. Let's say our parents get divorced, and for some of us, it's just a stepping stone into our own strength and seeing our own skills. And for some others, it is, the onset of trauma, which kind of keeps repeating itself in behavioral pattern, in psychological pattern, in self-neglect, and so on and so forth, right? Yeah, so not any experience you can have can lead to a loop in you, and the more you ignore it, that's how I understand it. The more
mm,
you ignore it, the more it gets fed. Funny enough, is that right? I mean, you're doing
yeah.
research on it, so.
Yes, and also many people, at least my generation,
Mm-hmm.
getting there, getting and we've been brought up in a way where trauma is not acknowledged, and you have to be strong, and you have to chin up and keep going. And if you um if you see yourself as traumatized, or if there's trauma in your life, it's that you're weak. There's something wrong with you. As you say, oh, look, this person has gone through all this and this person is okay, and look at you with this that happened, and you are a mess. And there is a big stigma about that, and that's why many people, even now that trauma is becoming more and more visible,
Hmm.
even now, it's very difficult to take that stigma
And
away.
yeah, there was something that was contradictive in what you said to me, or a paradox you said. You said we come from a society of constantly doing, and we're trying to produce results that we can measure, which is not a bad thing, but in some ways we are overdoing. And then you said, like, I discovered that I had a traumatic experience, and there was so much I needed to look at, and it sounded almost like you needed to do something. So we're back to doing. How does that fit together with for you? And what do you do when you discover you are traumatized?
um well, there's various things that you can do, and there's so many paths. I went through the path of somatic experiencing and somatic experiencing therapy. I found a beautiful therapist and beautiful woman, very wise, who was very attuned in all my yogi principles as well, and the way I see the world. Um, and I can tell you my first experience with her. I thought, and by the way, it was all because she wasn't local, so everything was through Skype. Back then, Skype was the main thing,
Mm-hmm.
and it was at first there was this part of me that was thinking, this woman, I'm paying this money for this woman to tell me to breathe. to breathe,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to look
Mm-hmm.
around, to move my arm. I mean, I'm a yoga teacher. Why am
Yes.
I doing that? Hey, what? Am I the worst yoga teacher in the world? I can't even do these things to myself. And then I was thinking, well, but I do that every day. I do my practice every day. I do this. I teach people to do this. What is this? And towards the end of the session, when I was thinking, this is just very silly and not achieving anything here again, that sense of achievement and doing, and because it was not doing, it was very simple. It was being supported, it was being seen, it was being held.
Mm.
And at the end of the session, I started, my whole body was shivering, shaking, visibly shaking, shaking, shaking.
Mm.
And that was part of that trauma being reintegrated in the body. There's this idea that I don't know if you're aware of Dr. Peter Levine, and he was the
Mm-hmm.
founder of
Yes.
somatic experiencing. And this is idea that trauma lives in the body.
Mm.
So the body reintegrating everything. And when I felt myself shaking that way, and I got a blanket, and my therapist was holding the space for me there, so yeah, this is something very profound, and this is something that goes beyond the doing and the thinking. This is something
Yeah.
that's why it's called experiencing. This is something that you experience, and it's very difficult to put in words. And it's, you know, the doing is necessary. If you don't do this breathing, if you call it doing, or if you don't do, because one of the things with trauma is that you can get into the freeze
Mm.
state,
Yes.
which is, you might look all right, but you're actually just not. You're just,
Yeah.
so afraid and so shocked, still living the shock. And that's one of the things that happened to me after the head injury. I
Mm.
went into this shock, and this freeze. Um, but is so important to see that everything that you're doing, that's not the goal, is not in the done thing, in the achieve thing. That is what happens while you do it at a very deep level. And the big topic of surrender, the yogic topic of surrender, that
Mm-hmm.
sometimes is very easy to understand intellectually, but embodied is a different story, and is a process. It's a process. And something that I'm welcoming more and more is the concept of grace. There's some things that just been given,
Yeah.
but you have to do the work. So there's the doing. You have to do the work, but the aim is not what you achieve by the work, is what happens underneath.
Yeah, and for those who are not coming from the spiritual connotation to listen to this podcast, I mean, to do the work, maybe we can just define it a little bit as to do the work is a way of becoming awake and aware, and not trying to flake out and be multitasking and busy on a shallow level, but to allow emotions to arise and to allow physical sensations to arise without being judgmental and absorbing it, right? It's about noticing what's going on with you and still being able to exist after. My tantra
Mm.
teacher always says, like, you can get an SMS from your consciousness or from your body, and what you often do is you make it a letter, so just take that as an SMS and as a notification of, okay, this is we're
Mm.
shaking now, so this is coming up.
Yeah,
Yeah. Is
yeah.
that how you would define do the work, or?
Yeah, no, I agree with the way you've described it very well. For me, do the work is do. Let me see. It's a very profound question now, and you've just defined it, described it so well. Is you need to do what you need to do, and you need to follow
Mm,
your path. So, for
mm,
example, in my case, I do my dinacharya, I do my Ayurveda habits, I do my yoga practice. All this is important, but they're not just important because I get something done.
mhm,
Is while I do it, there's something else happens that I can't even explain, but there's something else at a different level that happens. But that wouldn't happen without me getting up early in the morning, doing my practice, preparing, having feeding my body with good food and good nutrients. If I only focus on, oh, I have good nutrients and then that's it, that's all. Well, that's not everything. Or, oh, I've done my bed. Why things are not working out?
Yeah, like you were saying in the beginning, like, I mean, you can tick all the obvious Ayurveda boxes that have come
Yeah.
up through so many self-help books as well, and it's not even scratching the surface of what Ayurveda means to us
Exactly,
at
exactly.
this point, yeah.
So when in terms of doing the work, you still have to do it, because then when you work on the surface, it's very easy to say, oh, that doesn't work anyway, I don't have to do it. No, you still have to do it, because it does work. It's like it's a portal. I'm going to bring something, is a very, very strange idea. Is I watched this video podcast a couple of weeks ago. It was an interview to this researcher called Donald Hoffman. I don't know if you heard of him. And is I hadn't. It was sent to me. Oh, I think you're interested in this stuff, and it was sent to me. And this researcher, I think, is in University of California. I think. He is a specialist in mathematics. He's a mathematician and artificial intelligence. Okay, and then you think like, oh, okay, but he's exploring the field of consciousness, and he's got a book that is called "The Case Against Reality," I think. And so what he's talking about is that what you perceive from yourself or another person is far away from what we really are. So we have no idea. We have really no idea. What happens is that in our world and for evolution, in order not to be extinct and to survive in this material world where we live, we need to be very pragmatic, and we need to create a world uh, where we can function. So it's not, he said, all my colleagues think that the brain got so evolved, the human brain evolved so much that created consciousness. But he says, I think consciousness existed before the brain. Consciousness created the brain. And what we see are icons. He gave this example of a computer. When you go to, I don't know, a Word document, you just go to, you see the icon, you click, and then you write. But if you had to be aware of everything, behind, underneath, in order for all those connections and programming, you could never, ever write a Word document. So it's in our best interest to simplify life, to dumb it down a little bit. And what we see in reality, our material world, is this icon. And this icon is a portal to higher to what we really are, to that bigger consciousness. And he says we all have what is called what he calls conscious agent behind. So everyone, we are, reality is so huge and so vast that every exploration that we do, everything that we do, is only an exploration. It's only a portal. We're opening portals. And I brought this concept to all this Ayurveda undoing and all this, because that's the way I interpret it. Is when you do your yoga practice, when you do, or whatever practice. For some people will be walking or swimming or connecting, with nature. When you do your practices, maybe you're opening a portal to that bigger consciousness or bigger reality that you are. And that's where the change happens, rather than in that icon. When we get stuck to the icon, which is only practical, is where we get stuck into the doing, instead of seeing your daily practice as honoring a bigger reality that we are, and we might not even be aware that we are. I don't know if that makes sense. This is total.
What I'm hearing you say on a scientific level, if I would need to reframe it, I'm thinking of Joe Dispenza, if someone is familiar who's listening, and he talks about the plasticity of our brain. So, I mean, you said the brain isn't even the thing, but
Yeah.
if we want to use the brain more effectively, we need to open up, and look already at the results that we want to achieve. And what I'm hearing this person saying, the way the author of that book, Donald, well, who was it?
Hoffman.
Hoffman, is saying almost like there is an extent that goes even further out. We need to take in awareness that there is a higher power, and in surrendering to that higher power, we are managing our own egos a bit better. Than the ego. I saw the icon as the ego who
Mm.
wants to get the results, and who wants to have status, and wants to have, I don't know, whatever we want to have with our egoic mind. But if we use the ego, to do practices, if we train ourselves to do these practices, to open up into a greater connection beyond the
Mm-hmm.
neural pathways, we are on the way of evolution. We are evolving
Yeah.
into a greater merging of realities.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what he was saying. And I think that he was saying that all these concepts have been yogi and spiritual concepts for millennia, but somehow he has come up with this theory through maths. That is just
Is
through
mind blown to
maths
you?
and through science, through numbers, is able to prove all these yogi, concepts, and it seems amazing. It seems amazing to me.
It doesn't seem so much amazing to me, because there is also, I mean, it is amazing. Yes, full stop. It is amazing because we underestimate math, but I'm living together with a math and physics, geek. And so
He might be interested then.
he already knows so much. The two of you could probably have a conversation about that book. But and he could even explain it to you within a blink of an eye, I suppose. But there is this sacred math that we haven't kind of acknowledged in all our Hatha Yoga world movement. Like, a lot of people need to come back to their bodies. We are so much in the mind, and very few are able to use the mind to the capacity of seeing sacred symbols in our day-to-day world and reality. That's what I'm hearing you say. And yeah, sacred math is the acknowledgement of that there is rhythmic algorithms that we never understand, that we can't understand from what we call 2 plus 2 is 4, but it's like
Mm,
there is a different patterning in it. And so, yeah, once we decode that, we are coming closer to,
it's
yeah.
amazing. I just see the way I see it is that um, what helped me is to honor the mystery as well, to honor the
Yes.
mystery.
Yeah.
And yeah, that is probably is my not focusing on the doing, is honoring that, honoring the mystery that we are. and
Mm.
and yeah, and working from the heart, which is another big big topic. Very, yeah.
Yeah. And open up, and be vulnerable.
Mm. Yes.
Because
Yes.
if we're not vulnerable, I mean, if you wouldn't be sitting here and talking about something really bad that happened to you, and the ignorance that came in advance, the same with me when I became a yoga teacher.
Mm.
And then I had to find out that there is so much more I needed to change besides my posture and my fitness levels. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's,
and in the name of vulnerability as well, it's just it's something I read that as well, not long ago. Somebody in I think Twitter somewhere. There is this concept of lived experience. So
mm,
um, there was a time where if you were a therapist of some sort, of you a coach, you were helping people, or a doctor, you had to hide your own wounds, because
mm.
that was okay. If you can't sort yourself out, how are you going to help anyone else? That was this idea. Your credibility would go just down the drain. While now, more and more, is because I have been there, or because I'm
Yeah.
even there, I can understand, I can empathize, I can help you find solutions together. Um, and this is a thing is a great aspect of any coach, and in our case as well, when we work with health coaching or yoga health coaching, and
Mm.
it's very important that we've gone through the journey. And what I'd like to add is not just the value of lived experience, but the value of living experience, because I can tell you it's not only, oh yeah, that happened to me in the past, and then I found Ayurveda, and then everything, and I did my trauma therapy, and everything was perfect from then on. It's living experience, because we're human beings,
Mm.
and we keep evolving and learning, and sometimes we feel like we go backwards, and sometimes we still suffer.
Mm.
And it's not, oh, once you've discovered it, then that's it, everything is sorted. It's an ongoing evolution and journey.
Yeah. How long ago was that when you had the head injury? How many years is that now?
The head injury was in 2000, let me think. Head injury was 2017, so not that long ago.
Not that long ago. And then I remember, I mean, we know each other about the 3 years, I think, that are now between that accident or incident and now. And then I remember how you had to honor so many times not being capable of,
Mm.
marching forward in the community. We both found each other.
Yeah.
And had to really value your own experience and making all these inputs probably also more subtle. That's what I see when I see you and hear you. It's the nuances you had to already reframe and live through, besides other people trying to build the frame, and you're a little bit caught in the nuances
Yeah,
of it.
and I think something that we all, have to do, just find your own way. And it sounds a bit of a cliche, find your own way. And
Mm.
but it's harder than what it looks when you live in a world sometimes of expectations, and sometimes those expectations come from yourself. And if you are anything like me, with this fire nature as well, and having lots of ideas and wanting to achieve all these things, it's not easy to think, right, I've had this accident, this is happening now to me, I need to modify the way I work. And I do it, no, because I do it as a no, because I have to, and I don't have any other choice. I do have a choice. I could just keep going, and then who knows what would happen. But I'm doing it as a profound act of love towards myself, and I think this is one of the big teachings for me. Um, what does it really mean to love yourself? What does
Yeah.
it really mean? And sometimes it comes against what you desire the most. Sometimes, or how you had imagined your work could be. Um,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. One thing I'd like to know, I don't ask every guest, but we talked about perfection and doing and results in this conversation before. And then we always feel also that when we look at superheroes these days, they have a gift we want to have. And I read a beautiful book which was like All My Friends Are Superheroes. And in fact, what the author, Andre Kaufman, is pointing out is that we all have something. In yoga we call it dharma or a calling or whatever you want to call it, your gift. We do have something that we innately always do and carry with us, and we might not be so proud of it. Would you kind of gift us with your gift? Have you noticed what is your superpower as such,
Ooh, that's a very interesting question, because it's actually an ongoing. Oh, just give me a second. Yeah, so it's an ongoing journey. It's an ongoing journey, especially for somebody who's got many different. As I said, I'm very curious, and there's different facets in what I do. But I can tell you that if it's something, if you talk about innate or very early years in my life, and something that's been with me, and I feel is a gift to me, and maybe to others, hopefully, is my storytelling and writing. And whatever I do, and I think that's why I've ended up doing now this research on creative writing and
Mm.
storytelling and writing this novel, because whatever I do, from any angle, I end up writing stories. I end up in exploring the world through story. And doesn't matter how many different avenues. So I think that's what it is.
Wonderful. We need stories so much. I always liked reading books, and we need them because we lost that communal thing of sitting by the campfire, and
Oh, yes.
right, where we heard stories and where there was no distraction, and where we knew this was partly true and partly not true, but made it sort of spin our brains and activate
Yeah.
our creativity. Yeah,
I'm feel alive. I'm feel
and feel
alive.
alive. Yeah.
And that is part of I feel this is an important part of my mission on this world, to really just bring that bring back that value of storytelling. And my thesis, probably the title will change 1,000 times before I finish anyway, but the start point is the the healing power of storytelling um, is all related to trauma, but is in regards to reauthoring your identity.
Mm-hmm.
Reauthoring your identity. So,
Mm-hmm.
how through stories you reauthor that identity that maybe has been defined by different parameters that have nothing to do with you and what is good for you, either society or parents, or in the case that I am studying, intergenerational, so maybe even war events or the past events, or where you work, or what your friends do, because we're social beings. So reauthoring, because for as long as you keep stuck in a particular story of trauma, there's no healing possible. And
Yes.
I believe that reauthoring that story, retelling it, and that implies fiction. Maybe you need to make it up. Maybe you'll
Mm-hmm.
describe things not as they were exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you make them up. Maybe you use your imagination. Maybe this imagination is connecting with that bigger reality of who you are. I don't know. This is all my my musings, but I feel very
Yeah.
deeply connected to this work.
Beautiful. Thank you for reauthoring your story in this podcast for our listeners and sharing some valuable times and thoughts with me,
Thank
Veronica.
you. Thank you so much, Alexandra. It's a pleasure and really a privilege to be here.
Yes. Anything you want to leave with the listener, a word of advice, a myth you want to debunk, or
Oof. We've talked about so many things. I think that what I would like to leave you with is when we explore, if we are, if we when we explore ourselves and maybe our potential traumas or real traumas, just bring that sense of playfulness. And I'm being very careful using these words, because I know when you are deep into trauma, when horrible things have happened to you, this, it's not funny. It's not funny. So I'm not talking about funny, but about just feeling that anything that you're going through, even when it feels the worst thing ever, can be a portal to who you really are, and a portal for healing for you and for others. And even when we don't see it, when we are stuck in the suffering, having that gate open to that mystery that I said before, that different reality that is possible, but you cannot still imagine it, just knowing that is there waiting for you, and open to that.
yeah, and trust a little bit more. Mm.
Mm,
Yeah.
big word, yeah, trust.
Yes. Big word, trust, and creativity and playfulness. Hmm. Well, thank you again, and have a beautiful week, Veronica and dear listener, and I see you on the next show. If you enjoy listening to my podcast, please consider to become a patron at patreon.com/Alexandra Kreis and pledge your donation.